Hello, and welcome to AdAge's custom webcast sponsored by Veritone. The topic of today's webcast is, what does your brand sound like? I'm Christopher Hosford with the AdAge team, and I'm your moderator today. Now, we have just a few quick items to go over before we begin. We'll hear from today's presenters, and then we'll open the floor to your questions. So to participate in the Q&A portion of the webcast, all you have to do is type your question into the Ask a Question text area, and then click the send button. You may submit your questions at any time during the webcast to both or individually to our panelists today, and we'll address as many of them as time permits after our presenters' prepared remarks. Now, speaking of our presenters, let's get started. I'd like to introduce them for you. James Poulter is founder and CEO of Vixen Labs, one of the UK's leading voice technology companies. JP is a thought leader and speaker on innovation culture, the future of work, and emerging technologies. Now, we also have Sean King, Senior Vice President, Commercial Services, also at Veritone. Sean oversees the Commercial Services Division, including managed services for advertising, licensing, and synthetic media. His insights have solidified Veritone's subsidiary, Veritone One, as the leading AI-powered audio and influential advertising agency in the world. Sean, it's all yours, so take it away. Are you there, Sean? Oh, Sean, I think you're muted.
Oh, there we go. Well, you know, we'll get that awkward one out of the way nice and early. But look, I want to appreciate you, Chris, for the nice intro, and JP, thanks for taking the time to join us here today. I want to set the stage and really talk about voice as a whole and what everything around voice looks like, because we view voice as a new inflection point for brands, for companies, for agencies to really start thinking about. But it's an inflection point that we've seen many times before. And I just want to set the stage with kind of this notion around the mouse, and to date myself and, a few of us others on the call, I remember very distinctly getting my first Apple computer that had that mouse, a big brick with a singular button. And I remember at that moment when I had it, like how awkward it was to kind of navigate and use things. I'm no longer using the command functions. I'm now using this extension of my arm to start to control my device. And, but now we think fast forward to today, it's an extension of my arm. It's how I'm using it today. Companies are looking at websites and they're tracking how people are moving their mouses, where they're spending time on the site, how things are doing. And companies are optimizing their things to help with their consumer journeys. And that's how we all need to start thinking about voice today. Voice is going to be the controlling function of our interactions with our computers, with our machines, and with our experiences. And we just need to start thinking about as voice as this new dimension in which we're going to be executing and thinking about how we're having a better customer experience there. And if we can go on to the next slide here, voice is, and I was saying before, it's becoming the controlling instrument of our life. The world is going to be powered by voices and voice. We think about it today. We have watches, TVs, smart speakers, home appliances, phones. I can sit there and lay or sit on my sofa and I can turn on my television. I can adjust my thermostat. I can turn the volume up and down. I can command things with it over and what needs to happen. And we're not always thinking about, the continuity of our brand and the sounds of our brands when we're working through like this new dimension of voice and what we'll consider like the sonic identity of a brand. So when we're thinking about, as marketers and as advertisers, brands and agencies, we spend so much time thinking about, what is it going to take and what do we need to do to be able to bring customers through our front door? And then once they're in our front door, are we actually making sure that there's continuity in that experience? So if we can kind of go through that journey there for a second, we need to think about our customers or your customers having a consistent experience, from the TV commercials that they may be seeing, from the audio, radio spots between radio and podcasts that they may be hearing, from their mobile applications and experiences to their websites and even, in their retail storefronts. Are they getting that consistency in sound that is going through. When I've gone and listened to an audio spot and I'm going to a website, or I'm actually picking up the phone and calling, am I getting that same sound? Am I getting that same message? Do I subconsciously know that I'm in the right place before that? And there's this really great and wonderful experience that you can create by leveraging, sound and thinking about, the sonic identity of your brand and what it can do as not just a way to help in the customer retention and provide a consistency experience, but really being able to add and maintaining this continuity of your brand. And even thinking beyond that, where everything is, or, the hot topic for today is, Metaverse or digitally immersive environments. But, the challenge that comes with that is that continuity across all these experiences. If I pick up a phone and call an 800 number, or I call my bank, what is the sounds there? How does that differ from when I'm in a site or an application? What if I go to visit a kiosk? And now going forward, if I'm actually going into like a digitally immersive environment, am I maintaining that continuity that across all these channels, not just visually, but audioly, and that we firmly believe is key to a successful brand strategy, is really thinking and executing, on that voice strategy or that sound strategy to make sure that there's that sound continuity across your brand. And with that, there comes these really powerful experiences where you can provide a more personalized experience, a more localized experience, and a more regionalized experience. And to dive specifically more into that, what I'm meaning is that, think about it for a TV, film, or commercial. You're hearing my voice now in English, but, if I'm giving the same presentation in Spanish, you're likely today not hearing my voice. But being able to think of some of the power of synthetic voice and synthetic media and other ways that you can have that, you'd be able to hear my voice in Spanish, in Mandarin, in Chinese, in French, in German, being able to have that consistency in that sound. And, if you're going from one store to another store, from, sounds in your store to announcements in your store, is it a different voice? Is it a different sound than what you're hearing from your commercials, from your phone tree, and in any other places where you're having these consumer experiences? So to being able to connect with these audiences globally and on a much more personal level gives these really great opportunities, across, your social properties, contact centers, advertising and endorsements, your customer experience, heck, even financial briefings and corporate training materials. There's just that great ability that you can have some continuity within that. And so what we're going to do real quick is we're going to show a brief demo on how we've been able to take at Veritone, a conversational AI set with synthetic media. And here we're going to use our chairman and CEO, Chad Steelberg, who we've synthetically created along with his synthetic clone of his voice that he's given us, proper consent to be able to utilize, and to think about how we could do something where you can have consistency here. So what we've done is we set up a demo, for, right now we're hearing about the Great Resignation and the job markets and trying to do this. But if you think of companies like Amazon and you think of companies like FedEx or Domino's or any of these other groups that are needing to hire, tons and tons of people right now to be able to meet the consumer demands today, how can we make sure that there's a consistent, experience just in hiring? So here's a quick example of what you can do and the power that you can have by utilizing these things. And this is just one example that you can do. But again, thinking about it from customer services perspective, from education and training perspective, if you're, patient intake, recruiting, sales, there are so many different use cases that you can use within this here. And so we're really excited to kind of share this with you today, just to even just get you thinking about the opportunities that you can leverage sound, voice, and the synthetics to be able to really drive that continuity in your brand. And then after this, I'll hand the mic over to JP from Vixen Labs, who's going to talk about really how voice is becoming just synonymous with everything we do in day-to-day life. And with that, I'll go ahead and play the demo.
Hello. Thanks for your interest in the warehouse associate role at Pando Demo. I'm Digital Chad, an AI recruiter hired to help Pando Demo grow their team. I ensure hiring teams have more meaningful human experiences with top talent. The purpose of this chat is to kickstart the interview process. Let's kick things off.
Great. I'm excited to be here. Thanks, Chad. My name's Ashley.
I'd like to hear your elevator pitch. How would you describe yourself in 2 sentences or less?
I'm extremely detail-oriented, and I love to see projects through to the end.
Thanks for sharing. The warehouse associate will be an integral member of the Pando demo team. You'll be responsible for providing leadership for the operation of business, including development and implementation of operational policies and procedures. How many years of experience do you have in warehousing?
Over 15.
Great. Tell me more about that. Where have you worked?
I've worked at FedEx, UPS, and more recently DHL.
Let's dive a little deeper into your experience. Tell me about your 2 main responsibilities in your last role.
I did inventory management and control, and then I also supervised merchandise inspections.
Awesome. Do you have experience with accounting?
Yes, I do.
I see. In past roles, have you worked with balance sheets?
Oh yes, every day.
Do you have experience with policy, planning, and strategy decisions?
I do, and usually I work very closely with the human resources department.
Okay, tell me about a time when you made a mistake. How did you handle this experience?
One time I mixed up shelving, and so what I did to handle that is I actually brought in temp workers for the day, and we were able to quickly get things sorted so that we did not have any delays in delivery.
Understood. Here's a fun question. If you could have any superpower, what would you choose?
If I could have any superpower, I would love the ability to let anybody safely create a voice and avatar clone of themselves.
Well, thanks to Sean and thanks to Chad there as well, or virtual Chad. Good to have him with us. Well, thanks so much for that kind of lead in, Sean. It's great to kind of have this opportunity to speak to you all this morning, this afternoon, or for me this evening here in London, speaking to you from Vixen Labs. As Sean mentioned, I'm James Polter. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders here. And I want to pick up from where Sean left off really there, and that kind of example of just what it might mean for us in the very near future to have these synthetic voices, these created experiences kind of living amongst us. One thing that we know already today is that voice is part of our daily lives. I'm sure if you're listening to this with a pair of headphones, perhaps connected to your PC, those headphones probably have a voice assistant built into them. Just take the AirPods as a good example, as a business unit today. I love this stat that if you were to hive off AirPods from Apple as its own business, it would be bigger than Adobe or Nvidia on the stock market, just as that one business unit. And that is a sign of the times that basically voice is now something that's with us. Siri, Alexa, Google Assistant. Sorry if I've set off a device in your living room if you're listening out loud. These things are with us every day. Earlier this year, last year now, in mid-2021, we launched the inaugural Voice Consumer Index report in partnership with our friends at the Open Voice Network, and studied what was going on in voice in consumers' lives, really, across the US, the UK, and Germany. And we found exactly this, that this is something that people are using every single day. Now, in more than 2/3 of homes, we've got things like smart speakers in most of our rooms around the house. And for many of us, over 1/3 of the population using this every day, multiple times a day, as we see here from these stats. So the question is, well, what are we doing with our voices? Where might we come across these interactive experiences and where we might really be able to bring your brand to life? And that's where we go into kind of this idea of the consumer funnel. I'm sure for those of you that are watching, if you're coming from a marketing background in some way or working in communications of sort, then this is going to be a very familiar kind of funnel shape to you, from that kind of awareness to consideration. And we love that conversion and loyalty, don't we? And what we actually see is that for voice users, this is already their experience. They're asking very general questions to often search engines through things like smart speakers, through their phones, and increasingly in more and more interesting domains. That might be, driving down the highway, asking the smart speaker that's already in your car or connected device like an Echo Auto, or you might be using your headphones. You might even be speaking directly into the head unit of some of the newest cars that are out there. You might be, doing this in your home, wandering around the living room, kind of trying to, do the vacuuming or doing the washing up, and you're turning to your smart speaker or activating your headphones to get the latest podcast, or to, set a reminder to go pick up something from the store later in the day. So people are doing these common searches and common commands more than anything else. But for those of us that work within brands or are worried about the role of a brand, and if you're here today, it's probably because you are, then what we really get interested in is what people do after that general search query. And that's when people see that over 70% of voice users today are already searching for information about products and services. They're searching for local information. That might be about the local outlet of a store, or it might be a very local destination, or for health information. And they're actually going on to find out more information about specific brands. So that's when the idea of these custom voices and sonic experiences begin to merge with this overwhelming trend that we're seeing in the world of voice search. Because what we know is that when we speak to these devices, when you go and ask your Google Assistant on your phone, or turn to your Alexa device and ask a question, you don't get a list of 10 blue links that we're all used to when we go on a traditional search page. We've moved away from keywords to questions. And when we ask those questions, we don't get multiple answers. We just get that one answer. It's something we often refer to as this idea of position zero, that direct answer that comes out of the speaker. And that speaker has the same voice, whether you're Procter & Gamble, whether you're JP Morgan Chase, whether you're Men's Health Magazine, whichever you are. And I know that there are folks from all of those on the call today, so I hope that resonates with you. It's the same voice every time. There's no distinction. And what we're seeing is that people are now looking for more distinct ways of making your brand stand out in this, kind of sonic web, as Spotify talking about for some time now. And that goes to having custom voices that can really engage with this, and also engaging custom conversations. When we build voice strategies, implementing things like podcast and audio advertising, implementing things like conversational search, and implementing things like sonic experiences, often applications that are leveraging things like sonic identities, what we're trying to do is marry up what users want, what the business objectives are, and turn those into what we call conversational objectives, so that we can actually go and understand the types of things that people want to get out of their voice experiences today. What we're talking about when it comes to user objectives is that when we ask a question to one of our devices, there's a number of ways it can get answered. Many of you might be familiar with the idea of Alexa skills or Google Assistant actions, these conversational multi-turn experiences that we can interact with. They're essentially apps in the same way that we've had from iOS and Android for a long time now, but living in the voice space. But increasingly, people are actually looking for content and search results. And those search results and that content have the opportunity to really allow the brand to come through in a much more immediate way, whether that's creating your own custom audio content, whether that's podcasts, or in search results, both on the web and also in custom environments like Spotify or HBO Max, or these kind of closed wall environments, depending on what you're working in. So what we really want to understand is, where is that user coming from, and what context are they coming at it from? We know that voice isn't just a single device. I often talk about this problem of that we have this back button problem, or the go home problem. If I say go home to the Uber app, that means one very specific thing. It means take me home. If I say go home to McDonald's, does that mean I want to go back to the top of their menu, or do I want my delivery sent to my house? There's no, that same command, go home, doesn't mean the same thing in different contexts. When we used to design for the web, and for mobile, we had like one button that meant home, one button that meant back. But when we work in language, it means so many more different things. And so we have to understand the context of the questions we're asking. And then we have to marry that up with what businesses and brands are trying to get out of these voice experiences. And what we've seen over the past couple of years, we've moved out of that kind of Gartner hype cycle of emerging technology and overexcitement into that trough of disillusionment. And in that trough, what's coming out of it is actually the real business cases. And they typically fall into these three big categories. The first is brand experiences. People wanting just to enhance the experience of engaging with the brand. So I'll go with those examples I gave before of, like, hey, Chase, like, what's my balance? That's going to be a common question that for many banking customers, we're going to want to be able to ask. We're going to be able to do those common, simple tasks that we do every day or every week, or those bigger research tasks that often start with a search, like, give me the best mortgage rates, or, what should I be putting into my college retirement savings funds, or whatever they might be. So brand experience, this is a really huge opportunity to enhance what we're doing with our voice experiences, and often the place where we're looking to deploy these custom voices so we can actually stand out and have a true sonic identity that's scalable. The second area is in commerce, is that we actually want to get things done and make some money, right? This opportunity to actually sell in a whole new platform. And we're seeing the role of these actionable audio ads that we're seeing roll out across podcast platforms, as well as also on things like Alexa and others, become a really massive opportunity to make not just radio and audio advertising a great medium for communication, but a place where we can actually take action. In most cases, we're going to be hearing those adverts coming out of a device that we can actually respond to. And what happens when we respond and ask that question back? Well, we want to hear from the brand that we've just been listening to. And so this is, again, another opportunity to deploy these synthetic voices and build this sonic package that we work with. So, when I'm asking Tide, what's the best way to remove a grass stain from my kids' clothes when I'm doing the washing, I want to hear from a voice that doesn't just sound like Alexa. I want to hear a voice that sounds like Tide, that maybe represents them, or is maybe a clone of an influencer or a celebrity that they already have an endorsement deal with. But crucially, I don't want to have to keep going back into the recording studio to record every couple of hundred names that I've been previously working with. And this is another opportunity where actually moving out of using just voice talent, but cloning these voices provides a massive scalable solution. And even more so in the world of customer services. We've all been on the line of those horrible IVR solutions, press 1 for this, press 2 for that, and it just sounds the same with every turn. What if I'm talking to HBO Max's customer services team and I wanted to find out more information about the kids portfolio? Maybe I want to hear from Elmo. Maybe I want to have the cast of Succession give me business advice. At the moment, that'd be quite expensive to get all of those voices into an experience like that. But actually now with the synthetic options, we can recreate these experiences in a much bigger and scalable way. And so what we're really excited about as we bring together what we've been doing at Vixen Labs for some time of building these conversational experiences with some of this new technology from the Veritone voice platforms is to actually be able to complete this synthetically powered voice experience that actually delivers on what users want. And this is just one example, but with every one of these cases, we're always trying to build a conversation. And in that, we're going to be leveraging data from different sources. We're going to be implementing different business logic, depending on what that business outcome is. But now with synthetic and the ability to do this voice cloning, we actually have a very new and powerful tool in our arsenal because we can scale many, many voices to many different places. And whatever that control is that we have in process, we can do new things with it. We can learn new things from it. And we get far more information out of it because, if you're looking at click funnels all day or Facebook pixels or whatever it might be, you're just getting a lot of clicks, and clicks are helpful. They tell us a lot about what people are doing. But when we start getting speech back from people, we context with it, and that learning actually. So we're super excited about where this goes and how this new phase of sonic branding is going to power much more powerful experiences when it comes to interactive content, when it comes to voices, and also when it comes to scaling up audio experiences that previously have remained relatively static. So I'm excited to get into the conversation and look forward to answering some of your questions. I'll pass it back to Sean to take us into that.
Excellent. Thanks, JP. Really appreciate the time and insights. Chris, do we want to open it up to some questions?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Sean, and thanks, JP, for those great comments and observations. We are indeed ready to open the floor to your questions. So as a reminder, to participate in our Q&A, just type your question into the Ask a Question text area and then click the send button. We've got a lot of great ones already, but we could always use more. Folks, one of our attendees asks about bridging the gap between audio, let's say a podcast, and perhaps point of sale, even physical point of sale or digital point of sale. Our attendee says his company is visual first, so audio is a tough sell for him. What's your thoughts about how that app applies to a visual first company? Who would like to take that first?
Well, I can start, and then maybe JP can add to that. I think it really just comes down to, like, when we're talking with any client or anyone coming on board, trying to think about how they're going to express is what are the goals that we're trying to achieve? Because as we were kind of talking about before, and as JP was alluding to on, the commerce side of things from it, it's the content, it's the searchability of what we're going through. So at the end of the day, you're trying to drive someone through the funnel. So it's where are those elements where you can utilize voice to drive that function of commerce. We think about it today, as JP was mentioning, when we're buying things on our Google device or our Alexa. I had to just shut off my devices, JP, when you were talking. But that same notion, do you want that to be her or one of their voices, or do you want it to be something that represents your brand or something that can be consistent in what you're doing in those? So it really just defines on, what are your goals? What are you trying to drive? What are your environments? What is it at today? If there are no sounds, if there's no endorsements, if there's no brand, you have a blank slate. We can really start, the art of the possible about what do you want it to be. If you have some of those elements, do you want a consistency? Do you have this spokesperson, this actor or actress that you're utilizing as a brand ambassador, so to speak? Do you want to be able to take that so you have a consistency of that sound going through your entire process, from when you're first hearing an endorsement or all the way through that to the confirmations of sales? It just really depends on, what your goal and what you're looking to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll build on that as well, just to kind of, I suppose, bring into kind of this example that you mentioned about kind of bridging the gap between audio. The first thing is, to Sean's point, you have to be able to stand out, first of all. As more and more brands come on stream, everyone's going to be basically leveled with the same set of tools. And it's kind of the same thing as, like, you wouldn't expect every social media profile of every brand to look the same. You wouldn't expect every website to use the same set of colors and fonts. And the same thing is absolutely true of sonic identity and audio, is that when you step into that kind of audio first and particularly voice engaged, voice led experience, you need to be able to stand out. And that means changing up the fonts and the logos and the colors of your brand in the audio space. And that means that's changing up the voices, sound effects, and the use of music. These are the components that make up that kind of audio identity. To your question specifically, I think it's Joshua here asking about, kind of bridging the gap between an audio spot and going to point of sale. I think one of the most exciting things is really when it comes into the use of these voice devices and voice platforms to be able to make those audio experiences that once were static, right? You're used to hearing a podcast read of go grab a 20% off coupon and put it in at checkout. Well, that relies upon you remembering which brand it was and not getting the wrong brand in the first place. And secondarily, remembering what that code was and being in a position to do it there and then. With these new experiences, we actually have the ability for people to take action directly from an audio experience. So that might be hearing an audio spot, that's running in a podcast or running on a music platform. But now being able to immediately take action on that, turning directly to your smart speaker and saying, hey, ask for this service, I'm going to go deploy my code, or check out what's going on. And particularly if it's a visual brand, you have to remember that now over 25% of all smart speakers in the US sold are also visual, right? They have smart displays, Echo Show devices, and that over indexes, particularly when we go into talking about, kind of early adopters and more technical led kind of user groups. So there's a high visual component to those things. And also, we can take action on the 70% of phones that are sold in the US, which are also Android devices, where Google Assistant is also present. So we can actually take that immediate action. So I think there are ways of beginning to tie up the link between what has traditionally been a kind of quite static medium, but now be able to kind of take that action. But the only reason people are going to take action is if you're standing out in the first place with those audio experiences, and that comes full circle back to having these kind of voice and sonic identities that are going to make the difference.
Got it. One of our attendees asks actually the opposite type of question to the previous one. We've just addressed how in a visually oriented company they can bridge the gap with audio. One of our attendees asks, are there any industry domains where a conversational voice AI is absolutely, JP, you want to jump on that one first and we can hear from Sean?
Yeah, I'm just trying to find the question in the list here, so I'm hoping I'm answering the right one.
It would be number 9.
Right. Yeah, so I'll jump on that first one. So on the industries where voice AI is not applicable, I think we've seen people make attempts to do this in a couple of spaces in the past, in things like fashion, for example, where that's been not necessarily translating. Kind of come back to our previous point about the visual element. Fashion's a very hands-on, very tactile thing. But actually, we are seeing people make inroads in that, particularly when it comes to fast fashion and being able to use technologies to navigate often very complex and very vast catalogs. You think of some of the kind of big online stores, the Net-a-Porters of the world and things like that, where there's just massive catalogs of content to be able to navigate. So we are seeing kind of inroads there. We've also seen some challenges in the worlds of health because of regulation, but again, with HIPAA compliance and like that now being available in voice, we're definitely seeing that is moving in that direction. So I think there is no particular industry where this isn't applicable, but there are more obvious ones. We've seen, particularly in banking and finance, in entertainment, naturally, because that's the device that we're often consuming entertainment on, is also the voice device that we're talking about, whether that's our voice remotes on our TVs, whether it's our smart speakers, whether it's the head units of our cars, that they naturally lend themselves to it. And what I'd usually say is that often conversation experiences are not all that conversational. Most of the time, this is about short, quick turn, repeatable things that we do every day. And so therefore, the categories of things that we do every day are the most naturally kind of suited to this. So cold care, daily routines, those types of things. Actually, pharmacies and medicine, things like remembering to take my pills, remembering what to reorder things, those types of care settings are particularly interesting. Entertainment, naturally, and that kind of whole banking and financial kind of space where we're often doing these types of quite low engagement, quite routine types of tasks, like checking our kind of interest rates or moving money around or things like that. So there's definitely some areas where it's more applicable, but there's almost no areas where it's not applicable.
No, I agree, JP. The one thing I'll add is you're talking about the fashion side of it, though. But we look at, yes, it's very challenging in an audio only, but we're starting to see, in these digitally immersive environments, brands like Gucci and Nike and others that are allowing you to go and almost suit your avatar in certain types of clothes and do anything from that. And it's just, having those opportunities, though, where you can take the sounds and the voices in the real life examples that they're doing with Gucci and those, and having that consistency when you're translating that into like a digitally immersive environment.
Well, I'm sure I agree with you. I think to jump off of that point, and we mentioned it before about the metaverse. I'm sure AdAge maybe has an opinion on, is this the year of the metaverse? My general opinion is no, it's the year we'll talk about the metaverse, but that's not the same thing. The metaverse is in one way or another coming at us, whether that is going to be probably more AR than VR led. But whether we're spending 10 minutes in a Horizon meeting or whether we're spending 2.5 hours playing Fortnite, the metaverse is definitely here in some fashion. And as Sean said at the top of the hour, the metaverse is going to be voice controlled and is going to have an audio and visual component to it. There's no way around that. So, if Apple, in a couple of weeks' time does finally announce some augmented reality glasses, you're not going to be tapping and swiping on them. That's not going to be a particularly great experience. Why have they been pushing things like AirPods and making those cheaper for so many years? It's the training wheels for getting us used to having always on connected headphones with microphones that we can control. And so, voice will become the control paradigm of the metaverse, and that is inherently a visual medium. So, visual and audio will come together. If the metaverse would be a really boring place, if it was actually just visual, it would not be very immersive. So we have to be prepared for that to be the reality as well.
Gentlemen, one of our attendees was interested about your comments about cloning technology for voices and is hoping you can expand upon that a little bit. The question specifically is, our attendee has a voiceover artist that they've been using as the voice for their brand for a long time, and he's interested in creating synthetic voice experience using cloning technology. The question is, I hope that this makes sense because he wants his voice to remain consistent across multiple channels. Can you address that? Consistent VO artist now cloning his voice, multi-channel, and scaling his voice without having to come back into the audio room continuously and recording different messages. What are your thoughts? Who'd like to take that? Sean, would you like to take that first?
Yeah, I'll take that first. I mean, this is what we do at Veritone. It's one of our many applications from our technology stack that we do is this synthetic voice cloning and creating different modalities of synthetic speech for talents like this. And, we can absolutely do that today. But first and foremost, we're not going to clone anyone's voice without both written and verbal consent from that source actor or that VO artist. we want to make sure that they're aware that this has been created from them, that they're giving consent, so that because it's their voice, we take that very seriously. And then at that point, that synthetic model with that voice actor's consent would be, made available to the brand to be able to use that. And that's kind of, it's very, that ability to be able to really personalize and localize those messages. We could take that same voiceover talent and train it so you're hearing that same sound, that same actor or actress speak in Spanish or speak in German, speak in Mandarin. So you can have that global continuity of your sound of your brand across that. So that's something that is available and you can do today and execute against that. And that's not as a way to displace the talent by any which way, shape, or form. There's always going to be the need to have the real life person there for, big events, for things that you want to do. But if you need to get in at the last minute and you need to make some changes, or I may need to do 500 different reads really quickly, for that actor, for that voice actor, it's going to be very challenging to get that same continuity at read 7 as you have to do at read 497. So being able to have that for those, so it's basically that time and place. But to that same point, how much more is the brand going to be able to utilize that voice and be able to take advantage of it when the function of studio time isn't a consideration that they have to take in their thought process and in their production cycles?
And I just add to that, Sean, I think, just to kind of give you an example, over the past couple of years, we've been building out the conversational voice experiences on Alexa and Google for McDonald's here in the UK. And for a long time, we've not been able to implement a custom voiceover in terms of a voiceover artist, because that artist is A, in the UK, very expensive, B, only available so often. And because we change up the offers that are in that app every single week, and we have hundreds of location details, the readout would just be very, very cost prohibitive. And also, to your point, wouldn't sound consistent every week to week. Different microphones, different studios, the creative experience wouldn't be the same. Now we have the ability to go back in, clone that voice so it sounds very consistent with their high quality radio advertising and other things. But actually for short form content like the opening hours of a local restaurant or just what the offer is of the week, we don't need that high quality kind of audio that you would put into a TV commercial, but it can sound just as good and very similar, almost identical to the original voice. And so, that's one of those use cases which I think we're going to see many people take advantage of as this technology rolls out.
No, and to take it even further, be able to have that personal experience. I mean, being able to take that voice and power it with a conversational AI engine, almost like the chatbot for voice, so to speak, where you can actually be able, as a customer, to be able to experience and to have those conversations. You can actually be communicating and getting responded to and talk to the same voice that you're hearing, in all these different ads that you're seeing on the website, in the apps and the others. Again, that ability for a brand to really personalize and localize, is incredibly powerful for that continuity and that customer experience.
Got it. Our next question is a curious one, but I think it has real world applications. One of our attendees asks if you have any idea how this technology might affect people who have speech impediments. Now, I can imagine, let's say that an in-house subject area expert, perhaps even a CEO, might be not as fluent or as smoothly spoken as he could be. Is it possible to smooth out these types of speech habits or even impediments? Who'd like to take that hot potato? Or not?
Well, I can talk maybe. I don't know if I can answer the creative question.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
Yeah. But to answer that, I mean, a lot of what was done, and there's been a lot of people around the synthetic voice space and we've worked with a number of estates that are wanting to create a clone of the voice, either because they're a prominent figure and they want to be able to have that voice for usage for their generations, for their family and other things. So there are use cases where people are looking to preserve their voice, and voices will be able to change over time. We haven't come across that speech impediment as far as being able to create it and do something. I think we would all welcome the challenge to be able to say if we could be able to provide that or to provide the consistency for that. As far as that interacts with the devices and how everything goes, I mean, that's where I would defer to JP and his expertise on that. But, there is definitely a need where we've seen people that are looking to call, almost like bank their voice, so to speak. So in the event, if they become sick, if they have from that there is that opportunity to preserve it and make it still accessible to communicate, as they were previously.
Yeah. And I think so. We have a number of ways of manipulating the voices once they're controlled and created. Not every voice comes out perfect, and not everyone has the perfect voice that they wish they had. So there's also that kind of creative decisions to be made. So definitely in terms of preserving voices, you also touched upon briefly there as an example, Christopher, just the CEO, right? And I think that opens up just another point I want to kind of talk to, is that think about some of the kind of cost of the time of some of these kind of folks in senior executive positions in big Fortune 500 companies. The amount of time that they have to do executive briefings. I know Sean and the team are actually doing this afternoon for the Veritone kind of quarterly earnings call. Think about, I want to have my weekly newsletter of my CEO. Maybe he doesn't have a kind of great speaking voice. We actually now can do the synthetic, voice creation from a voice actor to another voice. So voice to voice cloning, which I think is just super fascinating. So if you need to have a voice that sounds like that person, but they're not particularly enigmatic or they're not necessarily the best speaker, you could even see down the line people doing exactly that, of having a great voice actor, someone who's got great cadence and presence, and then just have their voice created for them so that they can, show up better in press briefings or in, earnings calls or, even just your weekly email newsletter in your inbox that maybe no one reads. Maybe have an internal podcast that actually people do listen to because it comes from the voice of the CEO, but you don't need that CEO sat down in a studio for a couple of hours doing a readout. So there will be these examples where people want to, not just celebrities, not just kind of notable people in the public domain, but also in the business to business domain. You're going to see people wanting to do that too.
Correct.
Got it. The question of swapping voices has come up. This is quite interesting. How long does it take to produce a voice clone, like for example Sean's voice? The question came up about swapping voices. Perhaps Sean's voice for JP or JP's for Sean. Any thoughts there on that? And what would be the applicability of that? Just curious.
Well, sure. So, I mean, we'll break it down into there's a couple questions in that. First, on kind of the voice creation side of it. So, we create and work in creating two different modalities of synthetic speech: text to speech and speech to speech. And each of those are a little different, but the fundamentals of creating them are the same. So, to create a voice, we usually take about, 2 to 3 hours of content. And that just needs to be isolated audio content. If you are producing things already, we can just take the audio feeds and use those same created audio feeds to go ahead and create the clone. Or we can just, provide you a little script you can run into the studio and do something quickly and read that out. And then we go in and create the different modalities. So for the text to speech, that can take anywhere from about, 36 to 72 hours to go ahead and create that voice, and it's ready to go and deploy. Now on the speech to speech, it's a little bit more entailed because you have to create two clones. You have to create the source actor, and then you have to create the output actor. And then you have to map them to each other. And that process could take upwards of 2 weeks. Usually doesn't take longer than that. But in that instances, in those instances, the first modality is, James, if I gave consent for JP to have control of my voice, he could type in and output in my voice. And then the second one is if I gave him consent to have speech to speech, I would, he would be able to speak into the microphone. And then after some rendering, the output you would hear would be my voice. And, there are different use cases for those. So I always like to say, for those who, depending on what part of the globe you're at, either a football or a soccer match from those, and you're listening to those announcers, and everyone has their way of saying goal differently. It's their catchphrase, it's their trademark. And so being able to create that subtle personalization of what that actor or you're trying to represent that's very hard to do in text to speech. There's only so many different ways you could phonetically type or to be able to get that personalized replacement. But if JP can do a great imitation of me, then he can just be able to talk and actually get those outputs. So I think it really just depends on the use case for those. I mean, in fact, the recent episodes of The Mandalorian and Boba Fett that was there's a speech-to-speech provider that was actually utilizing Mark Hamill to power Mark Hamill when he was younger. And be able to have that, which is one of those ways to be able to say it. So, there's great, I'll consider those would be the high value, high touch ones where you really want to think about that individual experience. But again, you're still constrained to the same studio. It's going to require James or an actor to be in the studio to be able to recreate the voice, to be able to recreate that. So the extensibility of that is much more challenging. Where, in the other models, you can be able to rely on data inputs. And those data inputs can feed the outputs consistently, quickly, and be able to power those. So that is much more extensible. In that place, you can be one model to hundreds, to thousands, to millions simultaneously, where when you're doing the speech-to-speech, it's still a one-to-one basis.
Got it. One of our attendees asks about gender. Do you have any information on whether the gender of your voice impacts the quality of conversation or engagement? Who would like to take that?
I can speak a little bit to that. So what we see is there is no necessarily or more engaging gender, and not gender, but any other facet of a voice, both in terms of accent, regional dialects and things. It's all about who's it created for. And that comes back to where I was showing those, kind of user objective, conversational objective pieces before, is that one of the crucial parts when we go into creating a voice, and particularly if we're creating a voice from scratch, as opposed to necessarily recreating a voice of someone that's already created, is that we are always thinking about where is that voice going to be used. That's so crucial, that we don't just create a voice and think that it's going to make sense everywhere. We're creating voices for specific use cases. So, I might be thinking about the type of voice casting that I'm going to do for maybe an audiobook read could be quite different from the type of voice that I might be deploying into, say, a retail destination or into a theme park, in terms of like an interactive experience or any number of other places. So, gender definitely can be communicated in these synthetic voices, because in the same way that we pick up on the same cues that we would do from a personal perspective. But what's the right one? It comes down to the objective that you're going after, I would say.
Two of our attendees asks variations of the same question, and it pertains to the supposed contradiction between AI and personalization. How do you achieve both at the same time? And our other attendee asks, how advanced can you get with variations in tone, inflections in certain words, when empathy comes across, especially in a customer call center, for example? Seems like there's a disconnect, at least in the minds of our attendees, between AI and personalization and empathy. Any thoughts there about how technology can bridge that gap? Who'd like to take that one?
Yeah, I can start with that one. That gap can get bridged, and I can understand why it could appear to be that they're contradictory. But say, for example, in that personalization aspect, you have two people say, I am in the San Diego, California area, and I have two people in my local area, and one is speaking English, one is speaking Spanish. And being able to have a similar message, to be able to have something where they can communicate more natively in how they're doing, and being able to ask the questions that they want to be able to ask in the native language that they want to be able to, and to get that same response. The extensibility to that, so it can be on a many-to-one basis where I'm talking to this conversational AR, I'm talking to a synthetic clone, and the person next to me, we're both getting a very different experience utilizing the same piece of technology at the same time, and those same applications, which again can come to that. And there's absolutely those abilities to be able to create tonality and inflection in the sound and the response to those. Those again can be added input functions to help drive those. I'd be happy on whoever asked that question to be able to sit down and do some follow-ups where we can kind of showcase those, because I think that's where it really gets exciting, and that's where people really start thinking about, wow, okay, what can I really be able to do with that? And because there are what's really great is there's so many different opportunities, and we'll call AI and ML models that can help create for these different things and detect for those things and influence the model that's there. But you have to really be able to make sure that these are being orchestrated well together in order to make sure that you're giving a really wonderful output so that the end user feels like, again, you know, this is really great and I'm having a wonderful experience.
You know, one of our attendees asks the inevitable question, using a voice for your brand, should it be a known human or a fictional human? I guess if you've got Morgan Freeman on contract, that sounds really good to most people. On the other hand, it might be more cost efficient in many ways to have a fictional voice. Any thoughts about known voice versus fictional voice, or known human versus fictional?
That's a great question. Well, I mean, I'm the believer that, you know, if we're spending the time, effort, and material dollars to take some of these big voices that are known and being able to take advantage of that in more broadly across your organization without requiring that extra time from that individual is an amazing opportunity for those. But again, I also think it depends on the brand from those and how comfortable and where they want to be at within it. You know, it really is on a, I hate using the term case by case, but it really does. But like at the core of me, like I always know that, look, if you have Morgan Freeman or you have Matthew McConaughey or any of these folks that are out there doing these things that have those, you know, you hear their voice, you know it's them, any place where you can have that to be able to be that representative of your brand in that process, I mean, wow, that's a great experience you can create.
And I will agree, but also you know, add the kind of the devil's advocate to it, right? Is that, you know, I've worked for a long time in the PR world, and we also have seen examples where people have contracted those recognizable celebrity voices because of what they stood for, and you know, over time something happens, and you no longer want to be associated with that voice, and then you have the problem of revoicing everything you do. And I think again, this comes back to, you know, either creating a synthetic version of that voice where you're not necessarily kind of contracted in and you can replace things easier, or generating a voice that maybe no one's ever heard before but is unique to you and the brand, also provides its options. So to Sean's point, yeah, it is a case-by-case basis, both for the brand and also for who you're associating yourself with. You know, I think we had other questions in here, you know, saying what you mentioned earlier on. You know, I think it's an insurer that's had a voice for a long, long time and they want to remain consistent. Well, you might want that voice to live on. You know, if, heaven forbid something happens to that voice actor, then what? Then what do you do? Suddenly you can't keep that voice going. Some of this stuff now gives you the opportunity to have those voices potentially in perpetuity, or at least some kind of license agreement with their estate. So yeah, there are also some benefits to thinking about that. Comes back to that preserving these voices as well, whether they're recognizable or not.
Fascinating. You know, text obviously has a lot of search. Obviously has search capabilities. One of our attendees asks about voice. Is there such a thing as voice optimization? Perhaps I'm betraying my ignorance here. And how does voice optimization actually work and apply in this situation with this technology?
Yeah, so I mean, I mentioned before about the voice optimization in terms of searches, right? So what we estimate that, and it's hard to kind of get hard numbers from this for Google, but we estimate around about 30% of searches that are done today are being done by voice on a number of devices. That's based upon looking at things like the long tail questions that people ask, the where, when, how, why type questions, or commands that people are giving. And when you're optimizing for those searches, there are things that we can do. There's metadata we can apply. There are tags that we can create. And the same technology that we use to edit these voices is the same technology we can use to edit the way that the voice talks back to the user when they ask these questions. So there are optimizations that we can do. If people want more information, we can do a follow-up session on exactly that. But particularly the answer is, when you get those answers, comes back to what is it going to sound like? And that's particularly important as well in the voice platforms that you're going to be engaging with. When it comes out of Google's assistant, it's going to sound like Google Assistant. There's no way around that. But when you start asking for searches on Google Assistant, people are beginning to do searches everywhere. So, you're seeing microphone buttons appearing in all sorts of apps and experiences on the desktop, on your mobile, and also on, things like retail kiosks, on ATMs. And that's an opportunity for these custom voices to come out and answer those searches, in a custom audio fashion. So there's definitely opportunity there as well.
Yeah, and that's kind of where it ties back into where I kind of kicked it off with that mouse example. For years and years and years, we spent so much thinking about optimizing, where this is going to be on the screen, and where we're doing and how we're laying that out. The same functionality that's there goes within voice. What are the outputs that are coming in? How is the journeys changing because of when they're using their voice versus using, their fingers or their mouse?
So just wrapping up, there's the inevitable future forecasting question. JP mentioned, is this the year of the universe? No. Of the metaverse? No. It's the year of talking about the metaverse. But getting a little bit more projective here, how do you both think, and just briefly, how do you both think voice and sound will manifest in the metaverse as we're projecting it to be, perhaps the next 2 to 3, 4 years? Any future thoughts about that?
Sure, I'll go and give I think this is the year where voice begins to make material breakthroughs, specifically in more we'll consider commercial enterprise cases. And look, the metaverse or digitally immersive environments from those, there's a lot of talk around it right now from those today. But I think that talk is good because it's making brands think about I firmly think of it as God, this is just an amazing distribution channel where you can have another experience, another touch point where you can engage with content, you can engage with people, you can engage with brands, you can engage with companies, you can look for jobs. It's this other whole, world in which you can do all the same things that you kind of do today. And brands are starting to think about those things. And kind of both JP and I think, have kind of said almost ad nauseum is voice is that controlling function that's going to be there. And, the great thing here in real life and other things is we get sight, we get sound, we get motion, we get any of these things. But I mean, voice is that, kind of, and on audio is that kind of ubiquitous, sound that can cross over everything. And so being able to think about what is my sound, what is my sonic identity, what is the voice, what am I using of these things? Because those are going to be foundational pillars as we begin to go into the next, year, 2 years out, when we're thinking about these real life potential, actual metaverse scenarios that we're having. Because, you're going to need these foundational pillars of what is my brand's identity, what are my assets, and how am I using these and keeping that continuity across both of these environments.
And I'll say that one thing that, again, the metaverse presents is that everything in these environments, whether they're digital assets, in augmented reality or in virtual reality spaces, all of that is, it's none of it's kind of truly permanent in that sense. But the one thing that is your voice when you're talking in those environments. And so I think one of the other things we're going to see, both with whether it's creating synthetic voices or whether it's using your own voice, is people wanting to have a lot bigger control over that and ownership over that, and owning their synthetic clones, owning their synthetic voices. And also that it gives us this opportunity for voice and audio to be traded and dealt with as digital assets in the same way we're already seeing in the visual space with things like NFTs. I'm a believer that NFVs, these non-fungible voices, will become a thing because we'll need means of authenticating who we are in the metaverse. And the way of doing that may become, voice prints, and we're already seeing kind of biometrics as being a potential way of doing that. So, when we go into these virtual spaces, whether that's walking into a virtual event in a Facebook metaverse, or whether it's trying to redeem a coupon using your augmented reality glasses, you're going to need a means of doing that isn't going to be necessarily touch or typing based. You're not going to be typing out a password or doing a fingerprint. You're most likely going to be saying something, either a custom word or a phrase, or actually using the biometrics of your voice to authenticate, because the metaverse will not operate at the speed of fingers on a keyboard or thumbs on a screen. It has to operate at the speed of voice. So I think that's what we're excited for.
Great. Well, we've reached the end of our time. Thanks to everyone for attending AdAge's custom webcast, sponsored by Veritone. Now, you can also view and listen to this presentation on demand using the same link you used to attend today. You'll receive an email as soon as the archive is ready, so keep your eyes peeled on your inbox. You'll want to download it, listen to it again, and certainly share with your colleagues. So on behalf of our guests today, James Poulter from Vixen Labs and Sean King from Veritone, thanks so much for your time. Have a great and prosperous day.